Hello, welcome. Thank you for your patience. I was having some internet challenges earlier today. Hello, this is Dr. Kamani, licensed clinical psychologist. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we're going to be talking about joy robbers. So, welcome to my channel, my YouTube channel, Lifting as We Climb Consulting, Wellness Services. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. And so, again, we have a very special guest today, Dr. Vernita, and I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce yourself. So if you can introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Vernita Perkins, and I am a researcher and consultant, and my focus is on organizations and individuals. And I'm so happy to be here to talk about joy robbers because as we move into the pandemic, it is such an important issue. So thank
I
you,
think I
Dr.
lost you,
Kamani,
Vernita.
for inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. So let's kind of just jump right in, right? So this
Mhm.
actually is almost the anniversary of me starting the series, a YouTube series talking about Black women healing from toxic work environments, right? And I started the series, I think I talked to you about it, as a way to help me heal from a very toxic work
Mhm.
environment, right? And so I
Mhm.
wanted to provide a space for me, but also other Black women to talk about toxic work experiences to show that we're not alone and that,
Mhm.
that healing is possible. So it's so funny that we're back a year later, right, in October, which is Bullying Prevention Month. And that's why I launched it, because I was
Mhm.
experiencing workplace bullying. And so here we
Mhm.
are, full circle, right, as I'm talking about my healing, and I'm in a very different place, thank God, than I was before. So
Mhm.
part of the healing deals with joy robbers and recognizing who or what are the joy robbers in our lives, right? So,
Mhm.
Dr. Vernita, can you share what your perspective is in terms of what is a joy robber?
Right. So to me, humans and in my understanding and from my research, we're inherently built to embrace and enjoy life, right? And from childhood, it just gets socially conditioned out of us. There's all these restrictions, and it feels to me like from our childhood on, we just continually daily get stripped of that joy and of our happiness and of the things that make us make us joyful. And even to the point where, if you noted, like, it just was crossing my mind that, like, when we're children, candy, magazines, everything that we deal with is colorful and bright, and as we get to adults, it just keeps gently stripping away in teenage years and so forth, until the fact, the point when you get to be an adult, it just seems like we're not allowed to have fun and we're not allowed to have joy.
Mm,
And then we
mm,
have a lot of things in our lives that take that. And workplaces are one of the biggest, right? It can
yeah,
really
yeah,
just suck the happiness out of you because of the model that they were built on. So I would
yeah,
say joy robbers are, it's not just a system and it's not just individuals, but it's a consciousness, right? To want to
mm.
strip others of that happiness and not have it for themselves.
Yeah, it's almost like in some ways situations that are like soul crushing or soul sucking. So it takes all the joy out of us. You talked about
Mhm.
jobs, it could be people, it could be different situations, but it's so important for us to be aware of those situations because it can cause a sense of dread, unhappiness,
Mhm.
depression, all these mental health things that we know about, right? And so
Mhm.
when we think about the dread of, let's say, a job, right? And the dread of experiencing a workplace bullying or toxic work experience, that
Mhm.
is joy robbing because you no longer have the joy of doing the work anymore, right? So you may
Exactly.
have previously enjoyed doing the work and now you no longer have that joy. And so I'm
Mhm.
wondering if you can describe Dr. Vernita, about what are some examples of joy robbers? Like, what might they look like? How might they appear so that the audience members will be able to say, that's a joy
Mhm.
robber right
Something that, like, makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck, as they say, is the kind of wolf in sheep's clothing type of joy robbers,
there.
right? The folks who appear to be on your side and appear to be your best friend and really appear to be supporting you, and it's such uber gaslighting when
Mm,
they then steal your joy. And those are the ones who remind me of sort of like the stealth joy robbers, right? They kind of join, they sort of like just drain it out of you without you even kind of noticing, and the
Mm,
emotional labor that then compounds the joy robbing, right? When you have to keep, in the gaslighting process, you're second guessing yourself, like, did they
mm.
just siphon some joy out of me? What was that just happened? And
Right.
again, I think it can also be places and culture, cultures and experiences. So like organizational cultures can be joy robbers, right? So that you kind
Yeah.
of dread coming in, a little reminiscent of the concept of Stockholm syndrome, like you have to be there, but in order to, your passage into work every day is to pay the joy robbing toll, right? So you have to
Mm.
release some joy to enter, like a turnstile in a, in a public transportation, like you have to pay
Oh
that.
gosh.
And as
Oh.
you could see, as you approach it, right, you can see you're almost releasing some joy yourself, because you're just
Mm.
anticipating this vacuuming of your existence,
Wow.
right?
That was
So
deep. A vacuuming of your existence and
taking
paying
that
a
energy.
toll, like you're giving a part of yourself to be in certain situations or around certain people, right? So you
Mhm,
talked about some signs that you could tell that you are in a situation or around people who are joy
mhm,
robbers. So you talked about, like just that discomfort around them, like that skin,
mhm,
right, that your hair kind of
mhm,
raises up, right? You talked about feeling gaslit. What are some
mhm.
other things that somebody would be able to tell, like, this does not feel good for me. This might be
Mhm.
a joy robber. What are some other things?
Well, I think one of the biggest is, I think we all know when we're not in a good situation, and then through the layers of social conditioning that we've all experienced existing on this planet, you can sort of play with your own mind and say, well, this is not a problem, but I
Mm,
think we can sense it. But the way that I know is I watch my body. And
mm,
when, your heart starts racing, your stomach
mm.
turns, or you get those unfun butterflies, right? Not the roller coaster butterflies, but the, like,
Right.
you know, terrified of, or anxiety around what is going to happen butterflies. I think also just noticing the, like, I call it energy essence. And when you can feel your tank getting low, when you can
Mm,
feel physical exhaustion, the
mm,
emotional labor, which is that mental exhaustion.
mm,
Sometimes joy robbing looks repetitive. So if
What
you
do you
notice
mean?
that it's just this, it's almost like that hamster wheel. It's just this continuous cycle of it. And it kind of turns you into this sort of hopelessness. Sometimes depression comes out of that, right? Where it just feels
Mm,
cyclical, like that, kind of like it's not going to end, and that it continues. And remember, just like pain, we can learn, there are probably lots of people around the world living with, a toe that hurts, or a backache, or oh well, when I sit this way, my shoulders hurt. And so we just sort of accept it. And I think there's a little bit of a threshold of joy robbing, acceptance. Like, you just let the bar raises a little bit, and you're like, and you kind of go with it. And
mm.
we I believe personally that some of that comes from just the hopelessness of feeling like you're pinned in a situation you can't get out of. And so
Ah,
you
that,
kind of
that
learn
stuck
to adapt,
feeling. Yeah,
right?
like
That
feeling stuck.
adaptability,
Yes,
feeling
yes,
stuck,
yes.
and we adapt. And that's the
Yeah,
brilliance of humans, right? We're amazing
yeah.
because we have adaptability, but adaptability in fearful or stressful situations is not
Mm,
supposed to be permanent. It's supposed to be a
yes.
temporary state where you adjust before you get out of that situation. But when you're in a joy robbing set place, it generally doesn't go. And I think sometimes we miss the exit, the last
Mm,
exit before it goes to, right? Like, so think
mm.
about driving down the freeway and you think, I got one more exit, and it doesn't
It's
come. So,
right. You need to
right?
get off fast, get off fast, right?
Right. So, and,
Yes.
and here's the thing, when we're told that we're supposed to stay on the freeway, and we
Hmm.
feel like we really should get off at the next exit, that's that challenge, right? Of going, yeah, but I think if I stay on the freeway, it'll be okay. But after the
Yeah.
last, couple of hundred miles, it's not getting better.
Ooh, Oh, yes. And it's so interesting, Dr. Benita, when you talk about like recognizing the signs that you're stuck, right? And so I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
make the connection with jobs because I've been talking about Black women and jobs and toxic jobs and healing from that, right? And I talked also, Dr. Benita, about, people might be like, well, why are you talking about joy now? You were talking about toxic jobs. And, I just want to make sure that people understand the connection between joy
Yes.
and being in a toxic job. So when
Mm-hmm.
you're in a toxic job, like we're talking about, it steals your joy, right? It's soul crushing. It's just all these things, right? That's not healthy to us. And so
Mm-hmm.
the reason I'm talking about joy too, because I want us to have balance in our lives and I want us to know that we can reconnect to our joy. And part of that might be leaving a toxic job, leaving a
Mm-hmm.
toxic relationship, leaving a toxic friendship, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
are there things that we can do to help us or help kind of mitigate what's happening with us so that it can prepare us for leaving, right? So joy and toxicity goes together in some ways, right? In terms of a
Mm-hmm.
continuum. So when you talk about being stuck, I think a lot of Black women feel stuck in toxic a lot of things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'll just use jobs as an example, and I'll use myself as an example. So one way I knew that I was stuck is that I knew that that environment was making me sick, right? So
Yeah.
literally, it was making me physically sick. I wasn't well, psychologically, I just wasn't good, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I noticed for myself, I was stuck because there were certain signs that I could recognize in myself that were not myself, right? So I recognized
Mm-hmm.
like a sense of dread, like I did not want to go to work. I felt the sense of like, what am I doing here? Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what am I doing here? I can't understand it. That sense of like I'm in high school again, and I'm like, oh my God,
Right.
I didn't even like high school. So why am I back in high school again? I didn't sign up for this. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest thing, Dr. Bernita, was I started to feel like I was becoming someone who wasn't me, right?
Yes.
So I was disconnected from what drove me into the field, totally
Mm-hmm.
disconnected to the point where I was even
Mm-hmm.
questioning, do I want to be a psychologist or not? Like, can I do something
Mm-hmm.
else? You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes we need to take a step back and say, you know what? What's going on with me? So take a kind of quick assessment, like what's going on with me and why, and
Mm-hmm.
recognize, oh, that job, that situation, that relationship, that friendship is stealing my joy, right? And
Right.
also, when we think about joy robbers, we can also call them energy vampires. So I know
Mm-hmm.
for me, it would be like it felt like all the energy was being drained out of my body. Like I would go to a
Right.
meeting and literally I would have to talk to myself, self-talk during the meeting, stay awake, stay focused, stay focused, stay focused, because
Mm-hmm.
it was all just going out of my body, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so what tips would you give to someone, let's say another Black woman, if she was feeling stuck in a situation and she recognized there were some joy robbers around her? What tips would you give her in relation to what to do about these joy robbers or a joy robber?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing is that, and this may sound uncomfortable for some people, but the first thing to understand is what workplaces are founded on, and they are founded on a, at least for the United States, a slave plantation model, right? And prior to that, the European model of peasant and lord, that type of. So they've always been founded on this concept of, you know, a monarchy concept, right? Like one person
Mhm.
or a group of people have everything, own everything, have all the resources, and basically, wanting everyone else to work for as little as
For them.
possible and with as little
Yeah,
gain. So the
yeah,
concept is really that you're not supposed to have joy. And in the
yeah.
Industrial Revolution, we saw some factories operating that way in the early part of last century, where you're lucky you have a job kind of concept. So now when you
Mm.
layer that on top of being a Black woman, which
Mhm,
is now we're moving into these intersectionally marginalized
mhm, mhm.
identities, right? Then you have this additional invisibility, and additional the concept, and very much the slave concept of Black women being good for working. And then we know that when
Mm.
we look at, I mean, watch any television, stream any television show, watch commercials, and I challenge people, the first step is to really explore this for yourself, because I'm saying it here today, and there's so many layers. So I'm just touching the surface of it. But I'm saying watch how Black women are not represented on television and in movies. And the darker the skin and the more textured the hair, the less, right? And I challenge anyone to name 10 shows where Black women are featured prominently, respectfully, are valued, are seen as not just worthy, but desirable. And it's very rare. It's very rare. And we do have a few icons that are supposed to be representative of all Black women, but we know that's not the case. So our joy gets that extra double whammy, right? Because we're not only experiencing what the average person experiences in a workplace that really often doesn't value them, but then you have layers of intersection. And the more you are intersectionally marginalized, and this is research, this is not just me saying this, the more intersectionally marginalized you are, the worse it gets. So what we do in our research, what we look at, what I do in practice is we look for the folks who are most intersectionally marginalized, and not that it's a competition, but that are most intersectionally marginalized. And then we get their narratives, those lived experiences. And the lived experiences of most of the Black women I talk to is just a gulp, right? Like this, uncomfortable acceptance of the fact that if I'm going to have a job where I can be compensated and make some type of income, it's going to be uncomfortable and I'm going to be miserable. And it doesn't seem to matter where the ranking is. So if they're the least valued employee all the way up to like a C-suite, you still get that understanding that it's this emotional labor of constantly looking over your shoulder, constantly checking in, this extra need to be perfect and to not say anything wrong, not do anything wrong. The extra time I keep hearing about, like, it takes me 4 or 5 rounds to turn out an email. And I know these experiences, and I recognize it when I hear people say that. So the time it takes that, you start to hit send on the email and you think I better check it one more time, or you have to run up with somebody else to make sure that it's not offending anybody, that it's not misrepresented. We carry the weight
because we're so often tone policed that then we start tone policing ourselves. So that adds to the stress and the overworking.
And even if you get excited about something, like if you love the things that you do at your job or you love your team, there's this vampiring your joy, this joy robbing that sort of overshadows everything. And sometimes it's almost like just mist in the air. It kind of just becomes part of what you have to breathe to survive. So, and again, I say the first thing that I recommend is that people, that Black women know the history. And again, this goes for everybody, but Black women in particular, we really need to know the history of the organization you're with, the town you live in, because cities and towns can joy rob, the folks you're hanging around with, family members, it can be all of it, right? And so you need to know the origins, you need to understand what we call the positionality, like, what makes this person or this organization or this system do this. Then the next thing is, especially because most of us can't just leave somewhere, I say to start to do an assessment of your situation, of your town, of your network, of your friends, of your family, of your job, and say, what is it about this? Like, why did I do this in the first place? Why did I make this connection? What is it about this? Is there anything redeemable? Right? Is there anything redeemable? Not as an acceptance or justification, but as a reminder of what the core of this is, right? So what about it? So if we go to a job, maybe the reason you took that job was because there was an opportunity for you to create great initiatives or to do good work. Okay, so now then the next thing you have to ask yourself is, am I still getting to do that? Right? Am I still getting to do that in any way? I remember, and I'm not going to name the individual, but a famous director once said about Hollywood, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that's the problem. It should be what you know.
It
should be what you know.
Yeah, so when we take a moment to reflect, like what brought me here and what am I getting out of this? It's important
Mhm.
to assess all the time, like, are my needs being met here? Am I growing? And if
Mhm.
not, what can we start doing in terms of pivoting, right? And so we've talked a
Right.
lot about this, Dr. Renita, about pivoting, right? And so
Right.
it's so important to know that we can pivot, that we have the skills, we
Right.
have the talents, we have options. We're not stuck in certain places even though
Right.
we might feel that way, right? But it's
Right.
important to have a good circle of people around you to let you know you're not stuck.
Mhm.
Like you talked about
Mhm.
networking, which is so important
Mhm.
too, to let us know about other opportunities that we can possibly go into. And when we think about pivoting could also be, well, maybe you stay at the job for a certain time period, but you start looking
Mhm.
at your other options, you start developing an exit plan, right? So I just
Right.
want to be very clear to everyone. I'm not saying leave your job tomorrow, right?
Not at
Because it
all.
is a process. It is a process. For me, it took about 2 years, right, for me to leave.
Right.
But I eventually did, right? But I recognized the toll it had on me. I went forward with leaving the job, even though I know it was sucking my soul. I knew it was joy robbing because
Mhm.
what? I was scared, right? And I think
Right.
so many Black women stay in these situations because we feel stuck and we feel scared, right? So I'm
And
wondering,
duty. I was going to say add duty in there too, because
yeah,
sometimes we feel like, well, I can't let my colleagues down. I can't let my
mm,
spouse down. I can't let my friends down. I have an elder parent I'm caring for, all sorts of different reasons.
yeah,
But I feel like this that that sometimes you have to check before you rip the band-aid off. You have to check and see how the scab's doing, right? Because
mm,
that's part of your healing, right? So if
yeah,
you rip that band-aid off, you're going to start from square one on the healing,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
easier to test it, and that's where the self-awareness comes in, right?
The self-worth
And
and
then
our own awareness of the need for our own well-being, right?
exactly. Well, and that
Mhm,
is one of the key things in the joy robbing that isn't present is that oftentimes because of the role that Black women have to play in our society, there isn't always the option to think
mhm.
about self. And that's
Yes,
where we have to pivot. And I think
yes,
that amongst all other individuals who represent as female across all
mhm,
different identities,
mhm,
there's the juggling and the pressure there because we're not all often working together to support each other.
right.
So they'll say,
Unfortunately,
this is a
yes.
women's organization, or this is a feminist organization, or we support women, or we support, feminism in all its range of identities, right?
Mhm,
And then
mhm.
when you actually step into the space, that's not what's
Right,
happening. It's just more
right.
performative and it's lip service. So
Yes,
so so then again, that's an extra added layer of emotional labor and work to try to then now you got to vet the groups that are supposed to be your safe place, your safe pillow, your cushion.
yeah.
And so again, I think we we have to try to go into um, everything we do with the self-awareness. And again, that's one of the chief things that I research and I study over the past like almost 2 decades. And it's very rare to see it. In fact, I've even seen some research that sort of trivializes self-awareness
Mm,
because it's so important. If you
yeah,
don't know what you're feeling, if you
yes,
have no idea who you are and what you're
yes,
feeling and how you interact and how you relate and how you connect to others, then
yes,
yes, of course, you're going to do whatever you see out in the world being done, which
yes,
tends to mean that you're going to be putting yourself in a situation where there's likely harm, where there's
yeah,
likely, discomfort. And
yeah.
it's
And I think,
it's
uh, mhm.
no, I'm saying it's such a layered
It
it's so
is. It's
layered.
very complex, right? And I think what
Mhm.
happens is that over time, because of so many of these factors you're talking about, and particularly survival, right? Like I need to work, right? I need to make money. So it becomes a
Exactly.
sense of we become disconnected from ourselves, like
Right.
disconnected from what really fuels us, feeds our soul, what makes us happy, what all these different things, we become disconnected. So again, that
Mhm.
kind of ties into what I talked about before about many times as Black women, we don't even know what gives us joy, brings us joy. We're like,
Right.
I don't know,
Exactly.
right? Like, I'm so busy working and take care and all these different things. I don't even know what brings me joy. I don't have time. I don't have money. And that's the misconception, is that we think we need money to experience joy.
Mhm.
So that's the one thing. The other thing is, I think that sometimes we give our worth away to other people, and we allow other people or situations to define our worth, right? So if other
Right.
people around you are saying, girl, don't leave that job. That's a good
Mhm.
job. You need your benefits. You need all these different things. We sometimes give that more weight than our own
Mhm.
selves, right? Like, knowing we're dying inside, but still
Right.
feeling like we need to stay there because somebody said that you need to
Right.
stay there, right?
Right.
Even though, it's killing us
Mhm.
slowly, right? And we know that as
Mhm.
Black women, unfortunately, we're now dying at younger ages due to all this external stress. So the
Mhm.
importance of really centering ourselves and really being okay with connecting to ourselves, and knowing that even if we may not know it at the time, that there are options. But you also said something that was really interesting too. You talked about sometimes in the workplace, there could be people around us that we might think have our back, right? Or the job might say one
Mhm.
thing, do something very different, right? So in the
Mhm.
sense of not only like performative diversity, but also in the sense of just thinking about other Black women. So sometimes we
Mhm.
might see Black women and try to connect to them and feel like they have our best interest in heart, but sometimes
Mhm.
they don't. And so that is very hurtful and very painful, because that sense of betrayal, right? And
Right.
so, saying all skin folk and kinfolk, right? So I did a video
Mhm.
on that. I'll put that in the description section too. So what would you say to the audience in terms of how can joy be used to help us navigate through those feelings of being stuck?
Mhm.
How can joy as a momentum, as a compass to help us through?
When I first started coaching and consulting years ago, I would say I called it like the warm fuzzy, and I used to refer to it like the feeling of like when you cuddle a puppy and they're so
Mhm.
warm and they're so soft, and you just that I call it that energy essence just sort of starts to tingle and sparkle inside you. To me,
Yeah,
that's when you can you that so I feel like everyone needs to find what that feeling is. For some
yeah,
people, it's just standing face forward in the sun. For other people, it's spending time in nature. For some people, it's just reading a good book. Other people, it's being around family. When you
mhm,
find what that is that represents your joy, that is just inherent. Like there's nothing magical that has to happen. Like you said, you don't have to spend money to achieve it. It doesn't require, a ticket to Europe or whatever. When you find what that is, then I say
mhm.
let that be your compass. That's your North
Yes,
Star. That's what you
yes,
focus on. So when you're not feeling that way, when you first notice it, I think that's the time when you need to have that self-reflection. And then the
yeah,
other part of it, it's from this Sasrisi that we call it, which is self-awareness, self-reflection, and self-inquiry. And then when you
mhm,
get to the inquiry part, after you're aware and you're reflecting, then when the inquiry comes, like you said a minute ago, when you have to say to yourself, am I feeling joy here or not? You got to be honest with yourself and say no. And then
right,
the thing about the voices around us is sometimes people speak their own fear into the joy robbing. So they'll
true,
say keep the job because they're afraid of releasing their job. So you have to
right,
understand, you have to stop and do the origins and do the positionality and say, why would, my aunt be saying this to me? Why
yeah,
would my cousin be telling me to stay? And then you go, oh, right, because he every time he left the job, it ended badly. So now he's
mhm,
projecting that on me. Or you kind of have
right,
to put yourself in a position where you can try to, without too much judgment or harshness,
yeah,
just sort of sort it out. We remember that most people have had trauma, most people have had loss, most people have had some pain. Sometimes they still carry that with them. So that's going to
mhm,
reflect their response. And then here's the thing that I am so clear about,
mhm,
that as humans, we tend
mhm,
to only know what has been done. So
mm,
we see people, somebody's just trying to be better at it, being a better influencer on social media. Huh? So at the point when social media was new, it was fresh and it was exciting, and it was dip your toe in the water and woo, take chances.
mhm,
But now it's the standard. So what next? So
Yeah.
I encourage clients to look deeper. The course that's set in front of you, maybe that's not what you need to do. So when it's a freeway and everybody's buzzing down that freeway, and this is metaphorical, then maybe sometimes it's time for you to pull your car over and get out and take a walk.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
time to just the pivot is not always just a hard pivot or a pivot back to doing what everybody else is doing. Maybe it's time to just sit quietly and say, how do I know that making a choice to
Yeah.
to recapture my joy is not going to work out?
Not in this
What
space, right? And also
Well, but how do you know
recognizing,
it's not going to work out? Like, how do you know
right.
that leaving that job will be a struggle? How do you know that staying and allowing yourself to finally go to lunch with the manager, or finally work, you move over to that other work team, isn't going to be the opening, right? So sometimes, and I don't think it's about looking at the thing that frightens us and pushing into it. I think it's sometimes just envisioning something completely different.
Right. So
Like
exploring the unknown, right? Because we get
exploring the
channeled into
unknown.
thinking certain ways and then we don't explore, right?
And
And you also talked
we
about,
don't try. So the
we don't
thing we
try.
know is humans have to breathe air. We know that humans need hydration. We know that humans need some type of nutrition. And we know that humans need some type of mobility, whatever that looks like. Able
Yeah.
community, disabled community, all of it. We know that those are the things. There has to be some sort of engagement activity, right?
Yeah.
So knowing that, everything else is the possible, right? And
Yeah.
when you're not going towards harm and you're not trying to figure out how to compete or deny other people, when we move aside all of those things that are not the things that help inspire and empower humans, then what does it look like? Well, it can look like
Right.
anything. And it had
Right.
to for us to have a smartphone in our hands. Somebody
Yes.
had to say, what if there was something in the world that I could take something, a small device, and tap into it that would allow me to communicate with everyone around the world?
Yes.
Right? And
Yep.
in ancient times, they were on mountaintops with drums, right? And that was, signaling, and you would hear the drums from far away. But we have to figure out, like, what is that doesn't bring harm, that doesn't hurt others, that doesn't destroy the planet? What is it? And
Yeah.
with each person, you can make that choice. But I think that opening your mind to that is where
Yes.
this joy starts to return, right?
Yes, 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 yes. So open your mind up to that, right? Pausing, taking a moment to pause and sit with ourselves. Like you
Pausing.
said, get on the side of the road, slow down. Maybe you should not be speeding, right? With everybody else. Go pause, right? And by pausing, you're able to sit with yourself and sit with what really fuels me, what really feeds my soul, right? And also,
Right.
I think when we think about this, is knowing our worth and knowing our full worth. Because when you know your worth, then you know you deserve better. You know that you
Right.
deserve to be in any environment or around people who
Right.
affirm you. You don't ever deserve to be somewhere where you're not respected or valued, or
And
your growth
and not seen. What about
right,
not
or not
seen
seen.
and
Yeah,
not recognized as a human being, really,
right,
right?
exactly, exactly.
And
Our
so
humanity.
our
Yes.
humanity. So yeah, I say, look at that. I say, I don't even know if you can get to worth if you can't even remember what it feels like to have joy, right? So what you said about the
Mm,
pausing is super important,
hmm.
because I think we as a civilization have come to know that when you don't know what to do, it's okay to pause. And then what's
Mm,
the one thing everyone says, they say it in all of the spaces where there's, holistic practice like yoga and, any kind of working out, they say breathe, right? So you got to get that air into the lungs, get that oxygen moving around in that brain, and start, giving your body what you need. I highly recommend, when people get into toxic situations, you got to get good nutrition. You got to get your health back. You got to get sleep. You got to take care of yourself, because it's super hard to make decisions, to recognize joy robbing, and to make decisions to exit those situations when your body is not, performing at any kind of level. So what do people
right.
do? The first thing they do is alcohol or other substances, or putting more toxins in, or they do disruptive things or things that are physically harmful. And that's just taking more joy. And again, this
Or
isn't the
they're
one stop
other things
all
to fill
answer,
themselves
right?
up. Yeah. So they're doing other things to try to fill themselves up externally, right? Because
Right, but they're,
internally,
they're often they're things that rob joy too.
yeah, yeah,
Right. So
yeah, yeah.
sometimes, like sitting down and polishing off an entire bottle of wine alone, that may additionally rob your joy. It may feel kind of check out at first, but eventually
Mhm.
then you got to deal with whatever that does to your body, whatever that does. And again,
Right.
everything that I'm saying here today, you have to take it with in context and with a larger understanding. But
Mhm.
part of what I would have to say to people today is you got to try something different, and you got to check in first with yourself and find out, like you
Yeah,
said, how is this making me feel? Here's the other
yeah.
thing, that
Mhm.
since the pandemic,
Mhm.
and again, I'm asking everyone, since the pandemic, we realize how short life is.
Absolutely.
And the
You
pandemic
talk
taught
about a
us,
reality check.
yes, like that I don't care who you are, where you are, what you are, whatever, we all
Mhm.
know that in a split second, it can all be gone.
Yes, yes,
In a
yes.
split second.
And
And we now know, like everybody expected one day they were going to die, but now we know that it could just be random. One
yes,
day you're here, and then 2 hours later you're gone. So knowing
yes.
that, reinvest in, do I need to stay in these situations that are toxic,
Mhm.
that are robbing my
Mhm.
joy? You got to
Mhm.
think of it like a vampire, like a vacuum cleaner,
Mm.
hemorrhaging, like just sucking the life out of you. And
Mm.
is that worth it? And how long will it take you to choose
Yeah,
that you want joy?
yeah.
Because sometimes if we let it go too far, the cleanup on aisle 7 is more work.
Oh, yes. And I could definitely say for myself, Dr. Benita, that the pandemic accelerated my exit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, you talk about the reality check and seeing what's going on in the world and just like, wow. And I took a moment, and I'm sure many other people during the pandemic too. I took a moment and I was like, is this the life that I want for myself?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Like,
it's
what can it
not.
look like?
And why am I settling like this? I deserve so much better. And so
Mm-hmm.
that helped me, come from a more empowered state, not like woe is me kind of thing. Now I did go through a grieving process related to the job, right? And I talked about it on the YouTube channel. If you want to see those videos, check them out to the audience. But I knew that I deserved better. I knew it, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that helped to fuel me. So I also want to say, because we talked about two external people kind of telling you to stay, 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 and you're miserable, right? So
Mm-hmm.
remember, like my aunt told me, they don't have to live your life. You do, right?
Exactly.
And the other
Exactly.
thing is that they're not only coming from their own perspective of maybe something didn't work out for them, but that's their frame of reference. They're not in your
Exactly.
shoes, so they can't understand. So that leads to what I'm saying, what I'm going to say now is therapy, and how therapy can be very, very healing because it
Mm-hmm.
provides an objective place for you to kind of sort it all out, right? Nobody has
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
motive, just want to hear you. I'm a little biased. I'm a psychologist, right? We're in the mental health field, right? It's a little biased.
Right.
Know personally how beneficial therapy has been for me. And so
Right.
I just encourage anybody who's struggling, who's like dealing with these joy robbers, whatever, please
Mm-hmm.
seek out therapy. It's a beautiful thing, right? And there's different
Right.
resources about how to access therapy too, and I'll put that in the description section.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're winding down, Dr. Vernita, I talked to you before and I said, we were talking and I said, yeah, you remind me of like Phoenix Rising, right? And so that's why I wore my shirt today. I rise, I rise, I rise, because as
Yes.
Black women, just think about how many of us, our ancestors, our families, us, that we've been pushed back, pushed down,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we still rise. We continue to
Right.
rise. We always stand up, right? We are not, I never say that we're victims. We are
Mm-hmm.
victors, right? We continue to rise
Mm-hmm.
up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's important that, yes, we understand we will rise and we do rise, but we have to heal in the process too, right?
Right.
So when I talked and I said, Vernita, Dr. Vernita, you sound like Phoenix Rising, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how that resonates with you, Phoenix Rising.
Well, because and I'm going to speak to the Black women and other folks out there who are, tired of hearing this and tired of, like saying, well, why do we have to keep talking about it? And it's because throughout the last 700 years, we haven't talked about it. And every time a conversation happens, like they say, we're in reconstruction phase number 7. When we, because we every time we start to have the conversation, every time Black women start to have the conversation, we never get to finish the sentence with that period.
Yeah.
It always
Yeah.
gets hijacked or derailed, or somehow it gets derailed. It gets taken off the tracks. So part of it is to finish that conversation. Yes, it's uncomfortable to see our representation always being tied to slavery, or always being tied to something, some criminalization or vilification or something negative. But we have to finish that conversation so we can say that's the trope, right? That's what's been told to us. And then understand that we're not just rising out of that. We're going back in history to the beginning when that was not the issue, right?
Yes. Yes.
When there was brilliance and innovation and ideation, right? And so,
and our history didn't start with slavery, right? Our history didn't start with slavery.
Never,
but
not
even during slavery, there was such brilliance and resilience, right? So like pulling back and capturing our full history, right?
Right. So knowing the origins and knowing the true origins, and that goes across every system, and every belief system has origins that are false. And so and that's part of what we're doing right now in our world, is we're having to have the courage to tell the truth about the lies that have been told to keep people in joy robbing states, right? And so now what we need to do is move past that. So, and the way we move past that is walking through it, not trying to run around it, or not trying to be in denial about it. I know some people are like, can we just stop doing this? And then once I die, y'all can start again and figure it out. No, we're going to do it now. We need to have the answers now, because life is so short, and because humans are meant for so much more joy and brilliance. And we don't get to do that when we robotically just go along with whatever systems are in place. And remember, here's something that, and this is just my personal opinion, a lot of systems are put in place by people who are miserable too.
Oh my God, yes. Absolutely. Right? It's like it's a club, and they all kind of get together and they collude together. It's like amazing. Like, how are these people up here? How are all these bullies up here?
And miserable people who are behaving miserable, are happy to continue misery. I mean, they're happy to make that, because, and part of it is because it's all they know, right? And then you can see how easy, because the way we've all been socialized, it's so easy to fall into, because I remember as a kid hearing that's how life is, just try to get to Friday, work sucks, that, all these sayings. And I started asking myself, like, who made those sayings up? Where'd they come from? Why are they something that we buy into? Why? Because right now you see so many people saying, I don't care how much you pay me. I don't care where you want me to be. If it doesn't fill my life, I'm not doing it. And people have realized that, I don't need that much to live on. And that's not to say to employers that you don't have to compensate people for their worth, because you do. But it's saying that people are starting to go, I will pivot. I will find a way. I'm not going to put myself through this, right?
Yes.
So that's what we have to look. And honestly, Dr. Kamani, people have got to start talking to each other. You got to start talking. You got to start having those conversations that are uncomfortable, so we can push through it. Avoiding the conversations, avoiding discomfort is going to create more joy robbing. So we got to do the conversations, and we got to talk honestly and transparently. And we also have to have enough self-awareness to call ourselves out, right? When we're not living up to not just our responsibilities, but our humanity, we got to be able to call it out. And we got to stop being cowards about things, right? And really walk into it. And that's for everybody. And then for Black women, I think that we have to sometimes take those extra burdens off of ourselves and allow ourselves to find a path. Sometimes you need an easy path to get back to a more difficult path when you're stronger, whatever it is. But we need to start being represented as full human beings by us calling that forth. Because oftentimes, like I said, in the media and almost in every avenue, we are represented, we've never represented in a positive light, or rarely. It's usually that we're strong, or there, there's associations with us being more masculinized and all of that. It's like, come on. We're humans just like everybody else. We're struggling. We get hit intersectionally from more sides than most folks, but we still ponder. We still lay in bed at night and worry and wonder, and then we still embrace joy. So we need to recognize the fullness of our life, and the rest of the world needs to too, right? We need to be.
And I think as Black women particularly, that we need not tell another Black woman to stay in a situation that is joy robbing, right? That we don't, why do we want to collude with her unhappiness, right? So we want to help support our sisters grow, not dim her light, right? And so that's important for us to recognize as Black women. How are we lifting up other Black women? Right. So as
and just think about it, like, the communities out there that support each other no matter what. I mean, they support each other even when they have, people who actually are criminals amongst them, they still support. So we need to take on that idea of saying, when we know when we know a fellow Black woman is in pain or struggling or whatever, we need to stop, take a pause, and say, what can I do to help?
Exactly.
Right? Because just the saying of it opens up a space, right? So what can I do to help? How can I be there for you? Let's have a brainstorming session where we play worst case and best case scenarios. I mean, we got to try something, and we need to often, even if you want to try something that's comfortable, it also can't hurt to try something that's uncomfortable, to say, okay, so if you could close your eyes and make all this toxicity go away and you get your joy back, what would that look like? And have the person respond. What would it look like if the barriers that you believe are in front of you weren't there? And then have your sister friend support you in that and say, I'm gonna fantasize this out with you, right? And that's a way to spend an afternoon, or to spend a couple hours, like talking about what could I possibly do? What can I do?
The possibilities, right? And I think what's important too is that when you have sister friends or family around you who really want you to be well, right? And you cannot want somebody to be well in the same environment that's causing them harm, that's making them sick, right? So we have to say, you know what? I love my, friend, I love my, whatever, right? But are we condoning them being in an environment that's killing them, right? And also, we need people who are able to see things about us that we can't see for ourselves. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I know that when I was in the midst of all that toxic stuff at this job, right? I had two good sister friends pull me aside, Dr. Renita, and they said, first of all, Kamani, stop. Stop trying to convince these people who are not worth your time of your worth. That's the first thing. Second thing is, you need to leave, because this place is robbing all your brilliance, right? They're not recognizing your brilliance. You need to go somewhere else where you're able to be affirmed, right? And you're growing. And once you leave and stop fighting all that toxicity, you open yourself up to more opportunities, and your creativity just is like sparking, right? And I can definitely tell everyone that is true. That is absolutely true. And so you said this too, Dr. Renita, that sometimes we may not see it right here, right? We can say, okay, once I leave, this is going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen, right? I left scared, but I knew that there was something bigger and better. I knew it.
I knew it. And that's what you were talking about earlier. You knew it. And then here's the thing. Even today, this live stream, I mean, think about it. How many people's lives are going to be changed? How many people are going to hear this? How many people are going to know just another conversation, something different than what they've been hearing? And you have no idea what joy it will spark. You have no idea what opportunities it will spark. Just even two people having a conversation about this live stream could open up a whole new opportunity, right?
Yes. And I'm just looking at the chat right now, and they're saying Thank you for this conversation. Terrific topic, right? And again, like you said, Dr. Vernita, we need to have more of these conversations. And I'm very
Mhm.
open, I'm very transparent about my own healing journey. And I feel that if my healing journey can help another Black woman, I'm all about sharing it. And so my
Yes,
hope is that other Black women are doing this too, because we
yes.
have to support our healing because we've gone through so much and we continue to go through so much, right? So as
Right. And I
opposed
was
to
going to say, you don't have to be a doctor or a psychologist or whatever. You just need to be breathing and
just
willing to try to think,
breathing.
right? And willing to see something different. So,
Yeah.
and then sometimes, I remember whenever I would hear people speak in this positivity throughout my early young adulthood, I would listen over and over and over again. I would stream the video again. I would listen, because sometimes there is this layer of something in our brain that goes la 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 la. I'm not gonna listen. So sometimes we're like you said earlier, we're fighting ourselves because maybe even everybody around us is saying you need to get out of that toxicity, and then we're going, well, but I'm afraid, or like we say, the bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. The devil that you know. But in
Oh, how many
reality,
times have I heard that? Yes.
oh my gosh, then
With my
reality,
clients.
what I
Oh
said
my
to you a
gosh.
while ago is the way what you know about the world today, right here and now in this second. Now we
Mhm.
know from the pandemic, and now we know from looking back at history that we have no idea what the future holds. We have to
Yes.
be open to the possibilities of anything and everything. And we have
Yes.
to
Yes.
start
Yes.
seeing those possibilities as not some giant warlord from an alien race coming and crushing us. What about something brilliant happening? What about something amazing happening? What about
Yeah.
we all start to figure out a way to hug this planet? We all start to figure out a way to care for each other. What about like ending racism? What about ending these types of things, right?
Yeah.
Like, why
Yeah.
is it that we're always willing to just keep buying into the struggle? So,
Yeah.
joy reminds us of the playfulness, like I said, of the bright and joyful colors and things of our childhood, and that when we were kids, we didn't stop dreaming. There wasn't a
Yeah.
limit to our dreams. Why is there
Yeah.
a limit now?
Yes. Why is there a limit now? And also, when we recognize how we rise, right? We talk about Phoenix rising, going back to that, is that many times as Black women, we get knocked down, we rise higher, right? And
Yes.
so recognizing that we go through things, but that doesn't define us. And it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that that's our be all end all. And when I hear clients say, I'll stay with the devil I know than the devil I don't know, I'm like, why you want to mess with the devil at all? Right. So I mean, there's other possibilities, number one. The other thing is, I think a lot of us get tripped up in, um, no, somebody's not gonna run me out of here. I'm gonna show that person, right? We get into this thing, and it's
I'm
like,
glad you brought
but
that up.
you're
Right.
getting hurt. What's the
Right.
point? You're getting hurt in
Right.
the process. It doesn't help you, right?
You know what it
And
reminds me of? That reminds me of
uh,
staying in a burning building and going, nope, I'm not going to leave because I'm not going to leave until it's 7 o'clock. I said I wouldn't leave till 7, and I'm going to stand here. And you're like, okay, well, the building is burning around you, and now your hair just caught on fire, and standing there going, nope. I said I would stay till. Look, that is not integrity. That is that
no,
is
it's not.
that is harming
It's
yourself, right?
insanity. It's
Right.
insanity, right?
So
It's
so stop
insanity.
so standing there, and again, we also are in a country, the United States is a country that prides itself on pride, prides itself on integrity and doing the right thing and standing our ground and all that. And we have to remember that to me is what self-awareness, self-reflection, self-inquiry does, is it helps you gauge situations and helps you make
Yeah,
better decisions, helps you
yeah,
say, hello, the building's burning. Because
yeah,
like I always think, what would a squirrel do? A squirrel's going to get out of that building. A butterfly's
exactly,
going to get out of that building. Why do humans
exactly.
stay? Right?
Right,
Anything else
right.
is like, oh heck no, this water's too hot, or this sky is not right, or I'm not hanging out on
Yeah,
this tree, it's rotting. But
yeah,
humans
yeah.
will go, nope, I'm going to stay with the tree. This is the tree my parents had. This is the tree my grandparents had. I'm not moving from this tree. Oh my goodness. And here's another thought that I'm having. If you don't step away from that toxic environment, maybe that's the step that needs to happen for that toxic environment, for that company to close, for that toxic environment
Mm,
to end, and all of
mm,
those other individuals will find something greater. And if you're meant to see them, you'll catch them on the other side. Like at the
yeah,
next job you're at, you'll be like, oh my gosh, here you are. We're in the same
Yeah.
industry and here we are again. And
Yeah.
that toxic place will go away. But when we keep feeding into the toxicity, it's not going to go away, right?
We're complicit in it,
We're
actually,
complicit.
right?
And actually,
Yeah.
we're
Like we're
opposing it
complicit
because
in our own
especially
oppression.
because you just said about the phoenix rising and bringing our resilient energy, maybe we're keeping that toxic company alive by not exiting.
Oh,
Ooh, that's a scary one, right? Talk about Halloween coming. That's a scary
right. I was
thing.
about to say the same thing. Exactly, right? And so, it's interesting too, and we're going to close soon, but Dr. Bernita, it's so interesting because I hear so many Black women say, um, you talk all that fluff stuff about joy. I got too much other things. Like, there's too much going on in my life right now. I can't even go there right now, right? So, what would you say to a Black woman, Dr. Bernita, if she said, "I don't have the time, money, or energy for joy. I don't have time for that." What would you
You know
say
what
to
I would
her?
say? I would say that they are clearly still tapping into joy because that's how they're surviving anyway.
Mm,
So that's like saying I don't have the time to breathe air. Well, your body's gonna breathe it even if you won't.
right,
So
right,
I
right.
would challenge them to reconsider. And again, like I say, the pandemic, if that taught us nothing, all the running around, when I think about the years of running and rushing here and trying to make this thing and trying to do that and starting that and doing this and doing that, and then the pandemic, and again, not the term lockdown, because that is a prison term. I understand it's offensive, but to understand that we were quarantined because
Yeah,
we could still walk outside, we could still do things. But when we went
yes.
into quarantine, there we were trapped anyway. So
Hmm.
imagine, it's the old saying of the person who's speeding down the roadway, cutting people off and running through traffic lights, and then you pull up next to him at the last traffic light. And so all of that rushing, and they ended up at the same space you were when you just took your
Right.
time, made your
Yeah.
proper signals,
Yeah.
waited, allowed other people to go first, right? So then you have to
Hmm.
wonder, and again, I'm not making this stuff up. This is stuff most people would probably be laughing to themselves right now if they aren't angry about hearing this, because you're thinking, yeah, that's true. I've rushed and rushed and rushed, tried to get there first, tried to get to the thing first, hurry up. And then you end up there and the person who showed up at the last minute is standing next to you in line. So I say that's where the pausing, the
Yes.
quiet, the settling, the
Hmm.
staying with, just being with yourself,
Hmm.
holding that space, thinking about it, and just allowing is a huge word for me, allowing
Yes. Yes.
yourself to just experience, listening to your own internal voice, listening to
Yes.
the time when your gut just says, okay, now go apply for that job now, or go talk to so and so now, pick up the phone and just call them. And you pick up the phone and they say they can't talk to you right now. And you think, see, that was wrong. But what you don't know is that phone call put you back on their mind, right?
Mm,
So we don't know all the little teeny tiny things, like
yeah.
the little teeny tiny things that happen to end up making something greater happen in a couple of days or in a couple of hours, right?
Yeah.
And how hard we work to try to figure out and strategize and plan,
Yeah.
when we can do a lot more allowing, because the strategy and the figuring out is a great skill, but not when
Yeah.
it's applied to nothingness, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
I think we
And,
need to wait and allow, right?
yes, wait and allow, and like you said, pause and take care of ourselves in the moment, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
Audrey Laura talking about, taking care of ourselves is not, that's the act of political warfare, right? That we have
Mm-hmm.
to survive and thrive, right? And also just a shout out to the NAP ministry, in terms of rest and
Yes,
how
and
rest
that
is so
ministry.
revolutionary for us, right? As
No,
Black
and
people, as Black
the
women.
Nat ministry, I think people can get that, because that scares especially U.S. Americans. We like to be doing like crazy doing all the time, and so the idea of a nap is like, oh my god, that's what I did when I was a kid. I can't do that, but what I understand about the nap and the pause and just taking a moment is
Mhm,
it's the regrouping, and like
mhm.
everything inside of us, like our heart beats on its own, our lungs do their thing. You don't have to keep going heart, okay, beat, 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 beat. It knows to do it, and it works together with
Yes,
the other organs. And again, this is
yeah,
not true for everybody, because some people have different experiences with their organs. But what we're saying is that the idea that the natural order I shouldn't say order, but the natural flow of things happens. But
Mhm.
oftentimes as humans, we can get out of sync with that. And so that's, to me,
Yes.
that's what it is just stopping and going, wait a second, let me just listen, right? Just
Yeah. Yeah.
hear. And sometimes inaction is the action, because by taking the inaction, by saying, you know what, I'll wait and I'll do it tomorrow when it's going to be safer to do it, or when I have more time and I can really engage it, actually puts you in better situations. So again,
Yes.
I don't think there's one perfect answer for everything, but I do know that if you're not being self-aware, you're probably missing a lot of stuff anyway. There's probably things
Absolutely.
happening all around you every day that you're
Right.
missing. Um, Sending out 7,000 resumes and then getting frustrated when you could have paused and said, hey, what do I actually want to do? Because maybe sending out the resumes wasn't the thing. Maybe taking that trip to, up to the lake with your cousin and finding out that there's a whole nother career that you're interested in. But
Hmm.
again,
Yeah.
people, I mean, how often do we believe in only what we've seen and not
Yeah.
believe in the possibility of something looking totally different than it does now?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, when we think about rest, pause, it's important biologically to help us reset, right? It's
Mhm.
important to help us to reconnect to who we are, right? To our spiritual and our psychological well-being. But
Mhm.
also it's revolutionary, like the Nat
It's
Ministry talks about,
revolutionary.
Resma Menachem talks about it, right? So just the act of us being able to rest as Black people, that
Mhm.
is revolutionary because many times, like you talked about it, the history of work for us in this country has not been
Yeah, it's
kind.
not
It's been
been
very
positive.
oppressive, right?
Mhm.
So the fact that we are able to rest is revolutionary. And Resma
Right,
Manikin talked about the fact that we are able to rest as Black people, that helps to heal us in the present, right? It heals our ancestors because they couldn't
right,
rest. And it
right,
helps to heal our future generations because we're
right.
modeling for them the importance of rest. And so I want us to remember that the power of rest.
And watch this. It also helps everyone else who is not, identified as Black, because
Yeah,
what happens to us is happening to them even though they can't see it. And that is not a
yeah,
competition, or that's not an opportunity for them to try to appropriate the toxicity of our experience,
hmm,
but it's an
hmm,
opportunity to go, okay, because if it's happening to one person, it's happening to the rest of us. You can be in denial about it, but it's going to catch up with you. So we do need, and
absolutely.
I think we do need to do a reset on it. There does need to be, psychological, emotional, trauma, reparations, all of that, right? We need to have reparations for all the things that have been off, and
Hmm.
have been wronged, to humans. But at the same time, we also have to understand that we don't stay in one place, and we can't stay in one place. We have to keep
Right.
expanding that and understanding and knowing, right? So
Yeah,
it's a lot. And I tell you, the most powerful thing to me, along with just breathing, allowing that oxygen to get in and pausing, is conversation. What we're
yeah,
doing here,
yeah,
folks, if you do nothing, if you don't want to breathe, you don't want to hydrate and get nutrition, and you don't want to pause, at least talk to somebody. Talk to somebody. You mentioned before talking to therapists and professional people. I think also talking to your personal network, and dare I say, maybe having a conversation with yourself, right? And like an
yes,
honest one, because we can lie to
yes,
ourselves in conversation too. So let's
yes,
have those
yes,
deeper conversations with ourselves and agree to try something different.
yes. And I just want to say, Dr. Rita, even how I met you, right, was in terms of communication, right, and reaching out. So
Mhm.
my colleagues and I were presenting at the American Psychological
Yes.
Association on Black women in toxic work environments. And you reached out to me because you wanted to come, but you weren't able to come, right? And so then
Right.
we started talking about our own experiences. And so the power of being able to communicate and feeling that sense of validation, like I'm not the only one
Right.
who's gone through this. And this, like that exchange, and so
Yes.
many exchanges that I've had with so many other Black women over the course of this year, talking
Yes.
about Black women in toxic work environments,
Mhm.
is so healing. And in fact, one of the guests I had, she was like, we need to start a movement. And I was like, absolutely. And a
Yeah.
movement starts with awareness and conversation and calling it
Mhm.
out, right? Calling it out for what it is, right? And
And
so that's what
like you
we're
said, reaching out. Reaching out, right? Like I could have not reached out to you. when I
Yeah,
saw, I could have, said, okay, well, I'll reach out and then not done anything. So there is a little
yeah.
bit of courage in that, because sometimes you reach out and you don't get the response you want. So what? Just keep doing it. Keep reaching out.
And
Keep,
guess what?
keep
Those are not the
opening up
people
for
that you're meant to
conversation.
be connected to sometimes,
Yeah,
right?
and maybe
And
not just
so,
maybe not connected right now, right? Because maybe they're
right,
going through something. So maybe it's
right.
a connection for down the road. But I feel like there's not enough of that going on. Like people aren't
Yeah,
reaching out. There's and we don't have to do the fangirl, fanboy stuff. We could just reach
right.
out. Like just say,
Yeah,
hey, I see you, I hear you, I get it. You're not
yeah,
alone. And then maybe you
yeah.
just keep moving and you see what happens, right?
And
But
that
yes,
affirms
today
our
would never have
humanity.
happened without them.
That affirms our humanity, that we have a similar experience, right? And that we know we deserve more, right? And that we're
Yes.
supporting one another in our own pivoting, right? And so
Yes.
that's been very healing in that exchange too. So, Dr.
Yes.
Bernita, as we're winding down, I'm wondering if you could tell the audience about any services that you have or that you
Mm.
have to offer, and how people can contact you.
Yes. So one of the things that the Sasarisi that I mentioned earlier, which is self-awareness, self-reflection, and self-inquiry, I help clients with those processes, and allow the space, the welcoming space, the comforting, trust, and safeness space
Mm-hmm,
to have
mm-hmm.
those experiences. So and I highly recommend therapy. Like you said, I highly recommend having a clinician that individuals work with. But I also give people that opportunity. It's sort of like that space in between professional development and life coaching. That space in between where you can really try something, experiment with something different. So transformg.com is the place where we do that, and we create these spaces for this type of growth and for this type of experimentation and exploration, because we don't
Yeah,
get it in our society. We don't get any of that. I
we
mean, you'll have a
don't.
pocket of a space here or there, but nobody gets to really just play with their life and explore and examine and break it down in just in a space that doesn't have to have a definition.
Yes, yes, yes.
Right.
Agreed, agreed. So, Dr. Bernita, I want to thank you again.
Mhm.
I knew it was going to be a rich, rich conversation. I know it was, right? Because we've had really
Mhm.
great conversations, right?
Yes.
And I also want to tell the audience, thank you for tuning in.
Yes.
This will be on YouTube, my YouTube channel, if you weren't able to see the whole discussion. So I know I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and
Mhm.
YouTube, right? So if you want to see the full discussion, you can go to YouTube, Lifting as a Climb Consulting, Wellness Services. Please share this video with other Black women, right?
Yes.
Because again, we talk
Yes.
about communication, we talk about
Yes.
collaboration and sisterhood, right? So we are
Yes.
working to heal one another, okay, as we're
Yes.
healing ourselves. So that's one thing. The other thing, please subscribe to this channel. And then I also mentioned previously that I do have a workbook to help Black women become more connected to ourselves so we can start sorting out what is best for
Mhm.
us, right? So I'll
Mhm.
put the link to that, the Welcome to Your Queendom digital workbook, in the description section as well. So for everyone, again, thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you next time. And
Yes.
so again, Dr. Bernita, thank you so much for taking the time for this conversation. And I'm going to sign off. Any last words for the audience, Dr. Bernita?
I just want to say thank you for creating this space out of your struggle, and then you created this wonderful space. So thank you for doing that. Thanks to the audience for participating. I love that this video will be available for people down the road, because sometimes we have to revisit things. And then
Yeah,
I just want to say to everyone, you have the right to a full, meaningful life. Everyone
yes,
does. So please take advantage of that and participate in that. Thank you again,
absolutely.
Dr. Kamani.
And yeah, and as I saw in a t-shirt that I have, it's Black joy is an act of resistance, right? So we are resisting those attempts to put us down, right? To oppress us, right? Our Black joy, the fact that Dr. Vernita and I are here, the fact that you are here, that is a sign of our ancestors' resistance, right? They didn't just
Mhm.
they fought, right? And so
Mhm.
that joy and that belief that we will be here to have a different reality, we have to hold
Yeah.
on to that too. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, thank you, everyone. I'm going to sign off. Vernita, if you could stay on, please. Okay.
Yes, please. Yeah. Bye-bye,
Bye.
everyone.